Here is the truth. Most A/B tests are doomed to fail even before they begin. And this has nothing to do with statistical significance, sample size, or any issue like that. It is because of the one thing nobody's talking about: time. Too often when we run experiments, we forget we are not in a lab. But underneath the experiment, there is a real business with people coming in, first visit, and then at some point generating a conversion. And this requires time, and it's known as the length of the sales cycle. Now, the length of the sales cycle in a business is something you cannot change. It's very hard to change it because it depends on many factors. Sometimes it's not even up to the user because they need to kind of interface with somebody else to make their own decisions, okay? Take the example of business-to-business sales, where people need approval from their superiors, for example. Or in case of large purchases, people tend to think a lot before they make the decision to buy. So what happens during this time here? People are coming back to your site several times. These are called touch points. And today, these touch points are more and more frequent because our access to the internet is basically 24/7. Only when we sleep, we are not on the internet. And you can bet that people are coming to your site several times before they convert. Now, in some businesses, these times are very close together, so people can convert in the same day. In some businesses, it takes a week. In some, it takes months. And it all depends on the type of the business. So the first thing you need to do here is to go into your analytics and get the sense of how long it takes in average for people to buy from the first visit to the purchase. This is an analysis that very rarely is done. And if you ask teams, how long is your sales cycle? The answer is, well, we have no idea. Try. In fact, I want to ask you, do you have any idea of how long it takes for a visitor on your site to go from the first visit to a purchase? And if the answer is no, then you cannot possibly run split tests correctly because you don't know how long the split test should run. And now we come to the problem. The first problem I want to address in this video is the short blanket. And this is when you run an experiment for a time that is shorter than your sales cycle. And now that I told you, it should appear evident that if a person enters the experiment here, but it takes this time to make the decision to purchase, in your experiment here, you are measuring nothing. Because all the people that get into the experiment will buy here and later. And here you are measuring only people who started the experience way back, which causes the second problem. But let's stay with this for a moment. So this is how regular experiments are run. And I've been in the conversion optimization circle for now 7 years, and I've never heard anyone talking about this problem. Side note, from 2013 to 2017, I was a sales director in a factory that was making houses. Now, think about that. The length of the sales cycle for a house is give or take 18 months. So try to run an experiment like this to see if you can move something. It's impossible. And that's why I see the problem. I know that sales cycle is important, and you cannot pretend it doesn't exist. So this way of running experiments is plain wrong. Again, nothing to do with sample size, nothing to do with statistical significance. It's just you are measuring something that doesn't make sense. The correct way to run experiments here is this one. A smart experiment is an experiment that covers the entire length of the sales cycle and more, all right? So if your sales cycle, again, I said before, you have to know it beforehand, you have to measure it, and say, in average, people take 3 weeks to convert. Okay, so that's your very, very minimum length. You have to run the experiment for longer, all right? So technically, you should measure results only after the full length of a sales cycle. And this is a very bad news for experimentation because most companies, think about again SaaS, it takes very long time for people to convert. Most companies would have to run an experiment for what, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 10 months? That's way too long. So there is a middle ground here, and this is what the GTM split does. Now, GTM Split is a split testing tool that lives inside Google Tag Manager, and it's 100% free. It's open code, and it's extremely fast. I built this tool for myself to serve my clients and to overcome most of the technical problems I see with the commercial platforms. Plus, it's free. We don't have to pay anything to use it. So we have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars really in SaaS fees because we don't have to pay anything to run it. Now, GTM Split has native cohorting. And this means that it has an enrollment window which can be shorter than the serving window. You can enroll people in the experiment for a short time, let's say 3 weeks, and keep serving the experiment for months. And only the people who are already enrolled in that experiment will see the variance. All the other people can be enrolled in other experiments. So you see that now your experiment doesn't run 3 months anymore, but it runs 3 weeks, and then it makes room for another experiment which works in the same way, and they are overlapping. But one person always see only one experiment, not two, okay? One person can be only one experiment. And that's the beauty of cohorting, and none of the commercial platforms has it. Maybe they have something like this in the enterprise version, but with GTM Split, this is native and it's free. And this is the only way you solve the short blanket problem. There is no other way. You have to consider the sales cycle and you have to run experiments longer than that. And if you don't want to block the entire pipeline of experiments, you need to use cohorting. No tools has cohorting, so GTM Split is actually the only tool you can use. Now let's move to problem number 2. Problem number 2 is the dirty experiment. And this is even more common than problem number 1, because when you start an experiment, all the people who are converting here, and even later, they started the journey on your site weeks before. Of course, depending on the length of your sales cycle. Chances are that it's like days or weeks. And this means that they have seen the control. And now you're showing another variation. And this means that all your results are biased because you are not A/B testing, you're showing people another variation when they have been primed with a control. And this is not split testing. This invalidates the hypothesis completely. And yet, I would say that over 90% of CRO experts and agencies, they experiment like this. And honestly, this is quite shocking. If you look deeper at this issue, you see that for the entire length of experiment, you keep collecting conversions of people who came before. And all the conversions you see are affected by what on my book I call the novelty effect. So this is like people have seen the control, now you show something different, and it's like the surprise that makes them convert. It's not the variation. In the book I cover the novelty effect and the sales cycle duration and cohorting that we discussed before, the short blanket problem. So if you want in the book, you can learn more about this. But where does this leave us concerning the dirty experiment? Well, one solution could be to allow only the new visitors to be enrolled in an experiment. That's clean. But that comes with a big compromise because depending on the composition of your traffic, new visitors can be a small portion of the entire traffic. So you'd be running experiment with a lot fewer people than you could, which means longer times. So enrolling new visitors is a solution, but I would consider it as the nuclear option. That's the very last thing you should do. A better solution is to look into your analytics and clean your conversions, considering only the conversions that came from people who have seen the page where you're running the experiments after the experiment started. That's convoluted, complicated, but that's actually the only clean way to do it. Unless you start to track every page that everybody is seeing on the site and then makes it exclusions on the fly based on that, which is possible, but it's a little bit an overkill and not really welcomed by GDPR and all these other privacy laws. So to wrap it up, experiments should measure the change in behavior resulting by exposure to different variants, not resulting from exposure to something different, okay? We want to have clean exposures. It's either A or B, not A before and B later. This is the dirty experiment problem number 2. And problem number 1, you always have to run experiments for a time that is longer than your average sales cycle. And for that, you need cohorting. And if you don't have it, there's no way you can run experiments, or at least you have to run experiments very, very long, and you're blocking the entire pipeline. And all the teams who are running experiments for shorter time, well, sorry guys, but that's wrong in principle. All right, if this video taught you something you didn't know, or helped clarify something you kind of had in your head but you couldn't put into words, click the like button so we can bring this video in front of more people. And if you want to try GTM Split, well, it's free, so you have nothing to lose. It comes with a very nice user interface, and it works like any other split testing platform. So as long as you are using Google Tag Manager, you can use GTM Split on your site. That's it for this video. I'll see you at the next one. Ciao.